Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Throughout our district work period, I visited farms, ranches, manufacturing plants, and small businesses where people all said the same thing. It's time to pass the USMCA now. Farmers, ranchers, and workers in Kansas understand how important this monumental trade deal and they want it done now. On November 30th, 2018, the United States, Mexico, and Canada signed a monumental free and fair trade agreement for our countries. Since then, Mexico has made significant labor reforms and adopted the USMCA, while Canada is not far behind. Unfortunately, here at home, the USMCA is stuck in purgatory. Congress failed to bring the USMCA to vote over the summer, as some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle continue to slow walk and delay a vote to ratify the USMCA. While my colleagues may want to deny or at least delay any victory for President Trump, the only people hurt by delaying the USMCA are hardworking American farmers, ranchers, manufacturers, and families. Currently, more than 12 million American jobs depend on trade with Canada and Mexico. As is the case for 45 other states, Canada and Mexico are Kansas's top two trading partners, worth $4.9 billion every year, while supporting 110,000 jobs in my state alone. This impact underscores just how important the USMCA is for our country. According to the U.S. International Trade Commission, the USMCA will create 176,000 new jobs and increase U.S. GDP by $68 billion. Exports to USMCA partners will grow by $33.3 billion, and imports from the USMCA partners will grow by $31.5 billion. Overall, the update to NAFTA will create jobs, boost wages, and open up new markets for American agriculture and manufacturing. It also sets unprecedented standards for areas like intellectual property, small businesses, and the environment. This is a significant improvement over NAFTA, which was actually beneficial to my district in Kansas, especially for our farmers and ranchers and aerospace manufacturers. But the 25-year-old NAFTA agreement was outdated and badly in need of reform and modernization. Considering when NAFTA was first negotiated in 1992, Motorola cell phones were carried around in a bag, and just 1 in 5 households had a home computer. Even fewer than that could connect to a dial-up internet in order to access the World Wide Web, which had just been unveiled in 1991. Clearly, a lot has changed in the last 25 years, and our laws and trade deals should change as well. As representative of the air capital of the world and the breadbasket of America, I know that USMCA is critical for manufacturers, farmers, and ranchers throughout Kansas and our country. That's why I'm proud to serve today on the WHIP team, led by Whip Steve Scalise, to help get the USMCA finalized in Congress. Earlier today, our team met with Ambassador Lighthizer to receive an update on negotiations, and I want to take a moment to again thank him and the entire administration for the work they did to draft the USMCA agreement. Now it's time for Congress to do its part to secure this free and fair trade deal that farmers, ranchers, workers, and families in the heartland and throughout the country deserve. As a fierce advocate for free and fair trade, I believe a trade agreement with Canada and Mexico is crucial for Kansas and our country. However, President Trump is right to insist that trade deals both be fair and free. Free trade allows us to export our quality agriculture and manufacture goods around the globe, while fair trade enables us to do so at a fair price without intellectual property infringement. The USMCA accomplishes both of these goals. I have several members here with me tonight who also want to talk. And with that, I want to talk some more about some of the other benefits that are out there from the USMCA. But right now, I'd like to yield to my friend and colleague from Pennsylvania, Representative Perry.
Well, I thank the good gentleman for bringing this issue to light and for holding this special order, and of course my colleagues that are with me here today. And all of us that are probably older than the age of 25 have watched, probably in every state in the Union, certainly in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, our jobs. Every little town that you drove through in the state that I'm privileged to represent, every little town had some small business, or maybe 2 or 3. A shoe factory. We had a dress factory. One of the little towns south of us had a cigar factory or 2. Over the course of my adult lifetime, those little factories, those small employers in every single town have left. And the reason they left, it's multiple, but one of them is because the trade deals that were signed by previous administrations, they encouraged them to leave. They encouraged our competitors to take them over, and we closed up shop. We lost those jobs, and our folks in America had to go find work elsewhere and get retraining elsewhere. It has been 25 years since NAFTA was enacted. 25 years is a long time. Things were different 25 years ago. There wasn't e-commerce. We weren't all thinking about a globalized economy. And now these antiquated laws that we're living under are holding back our American economy. If we would just pass the USMCA, it's in the hands of the Speaker right now. If we would just pass it, 176,000 new jobs, $68 billion in growth to our economy. And instead of being worried about trading with China and being concerned with what China is going to do, we could trade with people that we really agree with that are right on the either side of our border, Canada and Mexico. Wouldn't that be wonderful? We need to modernize our laws, and that starts by allowing the USMCA to go through, and that framework should be considered today. We need free and fair trade. We don't have that right now. We must pass the USMCA to bolster quality, family-sustaining jobs in America, in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and other states around our country. The USMCA is a win for the American worker. We need to look, it's great to help out our neighbors across and around the globe, but our responsibility first is right here at home in our states, like the state of Pennsylvania, where I'm privileged to come from. USMCA is a great start and a strategic win. Today, I'm calling on House leadership to allow for the consideration of the USMCA without any further delay. Let the chips fall where they may, put it on the floor, and let's see what happens. And I suspect it will pass, which means the will of the people will be done, and we can get to work, working more with our allies and our friends, and doing better for Americans. And quite honestly, while China is waiting to make a trade deal, one of the reasons they're waiting is because this Congress won't approve one within the USMCA, and they're saying, why should we come negotiate with America when their Congress won't approve what we negotiate? We need to show them that we will approve it. We do stand with the American people and the American worker, and we need a better deal with China, too, and it starts with the USMCA. So I thank the gentleman for allowing me the time and for bringing this issue to the forefront, and I yield.
Thank you, Representative Perry. You said a lot of things that are really valid there and important for us. So, you know, I've got several other members that want to talk about how important things are, and now I'd like to yield to my friend and colleague from Ohio, Representative Troy Balderson.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to urge this body's consideration of the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, or USMCA, which has the support of both of our neighboring nations. The majority of our nation's governors, including Ohio's Governor Mike DeWine, more than 600 trade group organizations across the nation, our current administration, a significant number of my colleagues both in the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate, and myself. The USMCA will support tens of millions of jobs across the United States. In my home state of Ohio, more than 428,000 jobs are supported by trade with Canada and Mexico. The livelihood of my constituents is directly impacted by the success of trade with our neighboring nations. Last year, nearly $28 billion worth of goods and services were exported from my home state of Ohio to Canada and Mexico. These exports consist of iron, steel, motor vehicle parts, and machinery, much of which comes from my district in central Ohio. Ohio is also the 12th largest agricultural exporting state. USMCA will make important improvements to secure greater market access for our farmers and will ensure the fair treatment of Ohio's agricultural products in the marketplace. With $28 billion in economic value and 428,000 Ohio jobs on the line, we simply cannot afford for the USMCA to fail. It's time to pass USMCA now. With that, I yield back. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Representative Balderson. I appreciate your effort and involvement in this. Now I'd like to yield some time to my colleague from Wisconsin, Representative Grothman.
I'd like to thank the gentleman from Kansas for yielding. I also rise today to speak, urging consideration of USMCA. You know, I've been an elected official for a while, and even when I first began this job in the 90s, I'd get complaints of people as why we couldn't do something about NAFTA. We finally, after 4 presidents, watch NAFTA be approved, and watch jobs leave America, we finally have a president who is willing to do something about it. As mentioned before, this agreement is important for Wisconsin manufacturers and manufacturers all over the country. Wisconsin, of all the states, has the second highest percent of our workforce involved in manufacturing, and that's why when I get home, I hear about the importance of this agreement so much. But as important as it is to manufacturing, the major reason why I wish so much this would be brought to the floor is when I go back home, I hear so much from my agriculture sector. This is important for your corn farmer, but it's even more important for your dairy farmer. Dairy is in the worst position it's been, I think, since I was in law school in the 1980s. And I was a law clerk for someone who had a primarily dairy clientele. And it was so tough watching what these guys and gals went through in dairy in the 1980s. Now, due to low prices, we're back to where we again and again watch dairy farmers wondering whether they can hang on for another week, another month without going under. And here we have this agreement which has been sitting here waiting to be voted on, and we are not allowed to come in here and vote on it. I beg people, I realize that there may be some things you don't like about President Trump, but he's negotiated a very important agreement here, a very important agreement for manufacturers, a very important agreement for the agriculture sector, especially dairy. Please do not let this agreement wait anymore. Do not drive more people out of business just for partisan reasons. This is such a good agreement. It's so rare that we get a big improvement around here. I yield the remainder of my time.
Thank you.
To the Congressman from
I appreciate your
Kansas.
time and participation in this very important topic tonight. And now I'd like to yield a couple of minutes to my friend from Arizona, Representative Swiker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to my friend from Kansas who represents my wife's family. Hopefully I won't take a couple minutes, but there was a couple things as we were doing some economic numbers before. The modeling right now says if USMCA passes, it's another half a point on GDP growth. In a $21 trillion economy, that's real money. But it's also hundreds and hundreds of thousands of jobs. But there's even another complexity that I'm going to ask for folks to think about. Think of the issues we have, particularly with China. And so many of us would love to have a healthy relationship with China, but we don't believe they're playing by the WTO rules. They're breaking the rules. So we're seeing a world right now where lots of manufacturers are thinking about moving parts of their supply chain. Wouldn't it be an amazing thing that we do our job here, we get this trade agreement passed, and those components, those issues, parts of those supply chains are back here in North America? You know, our ability to say, you know, our continent, our trading bloc, our ability to not only have robust economies for ourselves, but these labor provisions. And this is the last thing I really wanted to hit on. You and I are on the whip team for passing this. We've had a number of visits with our brothers and sisters on the left. And a lot of them I will get this. Well, David, I'm concerned about the enforcement of the new labor standards that the Mexican government has passed. Remember, their legislature has passed this, their president has signed it, there are dramatic changes in their labor rules. And I will bring them a copy and say, but you don't understand, it's not the 1940s and 50s anymore. You don't send in a team of union representatives to go inspect one of the 70,000 some facilities and inspect and then write up a report saying, we don't think you're. In today's world, we have that thing called the internet. And the law the Mexican Congress passed actually has provisions in there for privacy and secrecy and the ability to use technology that if you believe your labor rights are being abused in a Mexican factory, you can actually document it. You can actually put it on a blog and those things. So how do we drag our brothers and sisters from the left to actually walk away from the excuse of the labor improvement enforcement and understand them that it's not the 1950s anymore, that now we're going to use technology and the ability to have that these new labor standards in Mexico can be enforced on a very large scale using technology. This is incredibly important to our economic growth, but our entire regions. Let's get this done. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you very much. I mean, you point out so much about how important it is to get that economic growth so that we've got the value in the economy, and how much effort that Mexico's made already changing the laws within their country to help make sure that it's a much more viable process for them, and it's more productive for them as well. You know, I come from Kansas, and specifically in my district, we have a lot of agriculture and a lot of issues there. And the USMCA is a great improvement for the agriculture area. I mean, it sets some unprecedented standards for agriculture regulation and biotechnology. I mean, it maintains duty-free access for American farmers in Mexico and provides new access for U.S. wheat, eggs, dairy, and poultry. In fact, the International Trade Commission estimates an additional $277 million in increased dairy sales to our North American partners under USMCA. That's a 44% increase that will bring much needed lift to the U.S. dairy industry. You know, another area is manufacturing. USMCA maintains a duty-free access for U.S. manufactured goods and removes some of the existing barriers for remanufactured goods, opening up a lot of new markets for American products. It encourages U.S. manufacturing by requiring 75% of auto content to be produced in North America. The U.S. Trade Representative's Office estimates that USMCA will add $34 billion in automotive investment and create 76,000 new American jobs. It also incentivizes higher wages, requiring 40 to 50% of auto content to be made by workers making at least $16 an hour, helping to boost wages across many manufacturing sectors. It requires Mexico to pass some sweeping labor reforms to improve standards there and create an even more even playing field for American labor. Mexico's already followed through and enacted these reforms, which are already benefiting U.S. manufacturing. Canada and Mexico buy more products manufactured in America than our next 10 trading partners. Exports of manufactured goods to Canada and Mexico account for more than 2 million jobs across our country. As a representative of Wichita, I've seen firsthand how important it is that our manufacturers have access to global markets. Transportation equipment exports accounts for $2.7 billion last year, and the growth in manufactured goods exports from Kansas grew 8.5% from 2010 to 2018. In addition, Kansas aerospace exports to Canada and Mexico have increased by more than 20% over the last decade, helping grow the total value of manufactured goods exported from Kansas to Canada and Mexico to $3.2 billion in 2018. These numbers underscore the importance of the USMCA for American manufacturing. You know, I wanted to mention that I've got some other representatives here who also have a big impact and a lot of value to add to that. And right now, I'd like to call on my friend and colleague from Pennsylvania, Representative Fred Keller.
Thank you. I appreciate the gentleman from Kansas yielding time to me. I stand before you today representing the outstanding people of Pennsylvania's 12th Congressional District to call upon the Speaker to bring up and my colleagues to pass the United States-Mexico-Canada Trade Agreement, otherwise known as USMCA. While back in Pennsylvania's 12th Congressional District during the August work month, I heard from our farmers, our manufacturers, and energy producers, all of whom would benefit from the passage of the USMCA. Their message to me was clear. We need to complete this trade deal so we can continue hiring, growing wages, and keep this economy rolling. Pennsylvania's 12th Congressional District, the benefits of the USMCA to our agriculture community are critical. Pennsylvania's 12th Congressional District is home to over 10,500 farms, 98% of which are family farms. Moreover, our district is responsible for 18% of Pennsylvania's agricultural sales. During August, I visited Brown Hill Farms in Tunkhannock. I met with dairy producers at an Ag Dairy Summit with USDA Secretary Sonny Perdue and my colleague, Congressman G.T. Thompson. I also attended Penn State's Ag Progress Days, Pennsylvania's largest outdoor agricultural exposition. At each visit, dairy producers said the same thing. The USMCA agreement would greatly benefit them by eliminating Canada's Class 7 milk, allowing American dairy farmers to once again sell milk ingredient products in Canada. Canada and Mexico have taken steps to finalize this agreement. What's stopping the United States from doing the same? Right now, the agreement is sitting on Speaker Pelosi's desk. Let's be clear. Failure to bring up the USMCA for a vote is a failure to stand up for American jobs, American workers, and American families. And that's a shame, because one thing that members of Congress share is that we want to do what is best for our districts and for our country. Our constituents sent us here to work on things that will actually help people. USMCA will do that by prioritizing American jobs, American goods, and American workers. Thank you, Congressman Estes, for organizing tonight's special order on USMCA. Let's work on things that can actually help people. Let's work on things that can have a positive impact. Let's pass the USMCA. Mr. Speaker, let's get this done. I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your time and involvement in this. I'd also now like to call on a friend of mine and colleague from the great state of Indiana, Representative Jim Baird.
I'd like to thank my colleague from Kansas for allowing me to have the opportunity to speak on this important issue. But, Mr. Speaker, I rise today to lend my voice in support of the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, better known as the USMCA, which will expand markets for our farmers and manufacturers while ensuring cheaper goods for Americans. In Indiana, our economy thrives because we are one of the larger manufacturing states in the country and an agricultural center for the nation. We make the steel that towers above the nation's largest cities in skyscrapers, and we build the cars that drive along the nation's highways and byways, and we grow the crops that feed the nation's citizens and livestock. We have built this economy in part through strong international relationships with countries as far away as Japan and as close as Canada and Mexico. In fact, it is the partnerships with our closest neighbors to the north and south that are the strongest and most vital. In 2018, Canada was the Hoosier State's most significant international export market, purchasing 34% of all the exports for our total of $13 billion in products. The 72 Canadian companies which operate in Indiana employ over 15,600 citizens of our state. Mexico follows our second biggest export market, purchasing 13.8% of our exports, injecting $5.5 billion into the Hoosier heartland. 2,000 manufacturing firms and 61,000 jobs in Indiana rely on exports to these countries. Beyond the strengthening of our export market, USMCA will also increase the percentage of cars that must be built in North America to 75% and require that 40% of the auto content be built by workers earning $16 an hour or more. This is both a boon for manufacturers in the state and the Hoosier workers that are the livelihood of our economy. This legislation also opens up Canadian markets to our U.S. turkey and dairy products and ensures that our agricultural producers have access to Mexico's markets tariff-free. Right now, due to the international trade conditions like the current delay in this deal, Hoosier manufacturers are seeing their growth stymied. The Hoosier farmers are hurting on corn and soy, and pork markets have taken major hits in the past few years. The longer we wait, the worse it gets. Nearly every day, I hear from constituents who are anxious to get this trade deal passed so that we can keep our economy in high gear. Our farmers and manufacturers in the 4th District need this deal for both the certainty and the prosperity it will provide. USMCA will further expand prosperity and ensure that the strong economic growth we've seen in the past 3 years continues. Mr. Speaker, I will close with this. Allow us to vote. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you. Now I'd like to introduce my friend and colleague from Florida, Representative Greg Stubbe.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, Florida, which I have the privilege of representing, Florida relies on trade with Canada and Mexico to survive and thrive, from transportation equipment to machinery to agricultural products. In 2017 alone, Florida exported $6.7 billion in goods to Canada and Mexico, and we are not alone. Canada was the leading market for the United States goods exported, followed closely by Mexico in 2017. These allies account for 34% of U.S. exports and 35% of U.S. imports. They are our strategic partners and an important part of our successful economy here in the United States. Continuing the long history of our successful trade relationship is essential to bringing the United States economy into the 21st century. That's why Congress should pass the USMCA. By implementing the USMCA, we would be creating 176,000 additional American jobs and continuing to grow our economy by over $68 billion. This agreement will protect American intellectual property, update our digital trade rules, enable data to be transferred cross-border, and expand markets from American agricultural products. USMCA maintains the successful duty-free access for American farmers in Mexico and opens the Canadian market up for the first time to American dairy, wheat, chicken, egg, and turkey products. American dairy producers alone would grow their access to up to 3.59% of the Canadian dairy market. And the dairy farmers in my district, in the 17th District of Florida, can use every little bit of an opportunity to sell their product. Approving USMCA will ease the uncertainty facing Florida farmers and ranchers, allowing them to make new investments to grow operations. This deal is a good deal for Florida and America, and it's time that the majority bring this important measure to the floor. I yield the balance of my time.
Thank you, Representative Stubbe. And now I'd like to call on my colleague and fellow Kansan, Representative Roger Marshall.
Thanks so much to the gentleman and my friend and fellow colleague from Kansas for leading on this issue and giving me the opportunity to speak about it. Certainly times are very tough in agriculture, the toughest I've ever seen, the toughest since certainly the 1980s. The passage of USMCA, the NAFTA 2.0, is the single greatest thing Congress could do for our farmers, ranchers, manufacturers, and workers. The President has delivered, and now it's time for Congress to deliver. Delaying the implementation of this program hurts agriculture across Kansas because the deal would enable Kansas producers to trade more commodities by opening the Canadian market up for American dairy, wheat, chicken, and eggs, some for the very first time. Additionally, this agreement will grow our business with our very top two customers, Mexico and Canada, meaning thousands of jobs and hundreds of millions of dollars of increased exports for Kansans. Finally, the unprecedented standards for agriculture biotechnology will support 21st century innovations in agriculture and lay the groundwork for future agreements and with other countries around the globe. Some of the brightest thinkers in the world are in America, but these innovators have been robbed of billions of dollars over the previous decades due to the intellectual property theft. USMCA can't be delayed any longer, as new protections of intellectual property will drive innovation and create even more jobs by strengthening protections of patents, trademarks, and secrets. President Trump's USMCA also levels the playing field for workers in my state by expanding guarantees for the enforcement of labor protections across North America. Future economic growth and jobs for Kansas and America are increasingly dependent on expanding U.S. trade and investment opportunities in the global marketplace. President Trump has delivered this incredibly bipartisan deal, and it's a long time for Congress to bring it up for a vote to usher in a new era in American trade. Mr. Speaker, it's time for us to bring USMCA now to the floor, and I yield back the remainder of my time.
Thank you. In closing, I want to thank all the members who've helped join us tonight. You know, as President Trump has often pointed out, many of our country's trade deals have not always created the best outcomes for American workers and products. But by approving the USMCA, we can take one giant step to overhauling one of the most fundamental trade deals with our closest neighbors. We can also create a great template for success, especially as we turn over our focus to improving trade relations with China and other countries. As we've stated tonight, there's no time like the present to get started moving this process forward, making sure that every provision of the deal is enforceable so that we can get the USMCA across the finish line. The cost of the delay is too great for our farmers, ranchers, manufacturers, small businessmen, entrepreneurs, and families. Again, I want to thank my colleagues for joining me tonight and ask this body to pass the USMCA now. With that, I yield back.